The cost to rebuild Hawke's Bay's roading network could be up to 4 times as much as Kaikoura, Waka Kotahi Chief Executive Nicole Rosie says. But the region has a long road ahead, with the focus still in the immediate response, providing access to communities.
And the decision about what is spent in terms of recovery is with the government in terms of size and scale. Obviously, we are here to deliver on that, and we know that the amount of money involved is quite significant. So our role in that is to get out with local government, assess these networks, look at the options and to assist the government with assessing those options as well as the cost of those options. So that will sit with government, but the money is significant. In the short term, we'll get people back in to their houses and we'll get freight moving and we'll get key connections made. To build back to the same that people had, yes, it will take some time. And in some places it'll be months and even some cases years before they see a similar level of service to what they had pre-cyclone.
The Chief Executive was in the region on Friday, meeting with staff, local government and iwi.
We are daily talking to each other. We're working on the issues of getting just immediate connection back to communities and talking about that on a daily basis. So this wasn't so much about that, although there is some work to do to prioritise the immediate opening of roads. It was also about how we think about the next stage. The first stage of any recovery is just to get people back and moving, so access to these communities. The second stage will then be to say how do we make these connections more resilient, how do we get people back up to more of a normal type operation in terms of how they function. That next stage and the further stage, which is how do we make these networks safe and resilient over a longer period of time, that's a lot of what we talked about today, is how we can join up together on making sure we're thinking about those things, even though we're in the immediate response still, to make sure that we have an aligned view that we can move as fast as possible and that we're working together on the key priorities for the region. The next question is, well, what do we do? How do we reinstate these networks and these roads for the future? The answer to the question is we will be working with the local community to answer that question. There is an opportunity to re-look at how we build in resilience and safety to some of these networks. I think the government has signalled they would like to look at that. We don't have the answers because that will be jointly done with the local community in terms of responding in the best way for the community, but certainly that is the type of thing that's being looked at. How do we make these networks resilient and safe, not only for now but for the future? And we are anticipating bigger storm events in the future.
Having grown up in Gisborne, seeing the devastation hits close to home for Nicole.
Well, obviously, being a person that comes from this region, I've been very close to the impacts on the region. We see real life footage. I actually know those roads, having actually driven between Gisborne and Napier many times in my life, and also north of Gisborne as well. I just understand the implications of those roads for these communities, and the impact's been huge. So we've daily get updates, daily see progress, daily see the impacts on communities and the damage to the road and the progress we're making in reinstating those. So I knew what had happened in this community. I knew those roads intrinsically anyway, but it is always really hard to come back and see the size and significance of the impacts, knowing the impacts on these communities. So we are really focused on getting these communities reconnected and these roads are back up and running as soon as possible. Well, there's really significant impacts across multiple parts of the network here. So there's the State Highway network, which we have State Highway 5, which is obviously impacted, and there's been a recent new slip on that. South to Wairoa is obviously still closed, significant impacts on that. And for this community, we're also relevant that there's very big impacts in the Tarawhiti Gisborne region as well. So we've got multiple state highway networks that have activity occurring on them, bridges out, major slips, overslips and underslips, as well as the local roading network, which is significantly impacted. What we're talking today with the local government about is that whole picture, all of those roading networks, actually rail as well, and actually how we can work constructively and fast to get those networks and those communities connected as soon as possible. This is a really significant event. It's actually really hard coming home and seeing the scale of it. And look, I think the community has been amazing. So it is great to be here and be able to support what is such a critical part of New Zealand.